Good day and welcome to the lecture series in Inquiries, Investigations, and Immersion. And today we will learn how to write the results and discussion. This is Sir Robert, and at the end of this session, you must have number one, illustrated data using three-line table. Number two, written properly the data commentary. And finally, apply the steps in writing the results and discussion section of your research manuscript. This afternoon, our featured research manuscript is titled Language Learning Strategies Use and English Proficiency of Senior High School Students. Before we go to the results and discussion portion of this paper, first things first, let us have some few sections of the introduction and methodology. All right, let us begin with the statement of the problem of the featured research paper. Examine the sections of the research paper, okay? Most especially the statement of the problem. As you can see, the researcher used strong verb to write the statement of the problem. For example, we have assess. So in your research paper, you may use determine to determine the level of academic dishonesty, something like that. So at this point, the researcher in his statement of the problem used the verb assess, a very strong verb. Now, let us know the research variables used in this study. So, under the statement of the problem, you are to mention the research variables. Number one, we have the language learning strategies used, and the other one is the level of English proficiency. So, class, it is mentioned in the statement of the problem. Now, who are our respondents? The senior high school students. Where? Enrolled in a private academic institution in Bacolod City. When? School year 2020-2021. So, as you can see in the statement of the problem, the researcher provided all the details to make the research problem or the statement of the problem SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, result-oriented, and time-bound. So the statement of the problem is suppose one to two sentences only. So on the second sentences here, the researchers state that the salient findings of the study would serve as basis for constructing a development plan. For what purpose? That is to improve the English language teaching and learning. So this is a very good example of the main statement of the problem. Class, follow this in your manuscript. You are to write the statement of the problem following our SMART objectives. Alright? So we will proceed with the specific problems of our featured research paper. Specifically, the research questions number 1 and 2. Take a look at this. Examine closely the research questions 1 and 2. Number 1 research question ask about the language learning strategies used by senior high school students when they are grouped according to sex and strand and when taken as a whole. Look at this part. In this part, the researcher ended with a question mark. So do the same. Do not put letters A, B, and C for sex, strand, and as a whole anymore. So you have to include these variables, specific variables of your study, in the question. So you always end with a question mark. So this is a very good example also of formulating a research question. Next, do the same with the level of English proficiency. ask what is the level of English proficiency of the senior high school students when they are grouped according to sex and strand and when taken as a whole. So this is a very good example of a statement of the problem, class. So you have to follow this one in constructing your own statement of the problem and research questions. Alright, so now that you have background knowledge on what's the study all about, basing on the statement of the problem, we will move further now on the methodology section, specifically how the researcher wrote the respondent section. Okay, so let us proceed with the methods featuring the respondent section of the methodology. So under the respondent section, class, we are to discuss the following. Number one, who are our respondents? What is the total sample size? What is the sampling procedure you have utilized? Okay? So there are three elements under the respondent section of the research methodology. And take a look at this because this is how you provide the profile of the respondents. When we say profile of the respondents, remember, going back in the statement of the problem, we are to divide our respondents according to sex and strand. So meaning, we have to provide the sample size based on sex and strand. And these two are called strata or subgroups, sex, strand. Further, in sex, we have male, female. In strand, we have UMS, STEM, HEABM. So take a look at this. Let's highlight the following. So on the first sentence, under your respondent section, you may follow this. You may pattern. This is how we learn how to write our sections of the research paper. This is modeling. Okay? We model our research papers from the previous research paper. And let's start from scratch, of course. So take a look at this. The respondents were the 235 senior high school students. It's mentioned again on the first statement under the respondent section. Of course, you have to provide the locale and the date. Alright, so that's it for the respondent section. Next, on the second paragraph, you are to discuss the sample size. How did you determine the sample size? And what is the sampling procedure you have used? Alright, so Yamani's formula, class, is the same with Sloven's formula. You have to mention that. And state directly what is the total sample size out of the given total population. So this time, out of 235, we have, out of 570 grade 12 students, you are to administer the survey questionnaire to 235 students only. Now, proceed with discussing the sampling procedure you have used. For example, in here, the researcher used stratified random sampling. So mention it that in selecting the respondents, stratified random sampling was used. And moreover, you are to define or describe stratified random sampling. So in here, the researcher cited an author, Tahir Dust, 2016, to describe what is stratified random sampling. And then finally, on the third sentence or the last sentence, justify why did you choose the sampling technique. Okay, why did you use stratified random sampling? So that is, the researcher used stratified random sampling to ensure that each stratum, okay, stratum refers to the respondent's sex and strand, are adequately represented. So that is why stratified random sampling is used. Now, our target number one is, or our target number two, objective number two is to write properly the data commentary. So the next paragraphs are is the data commentary of the respondent section. Because class, take note that the data commentary is the written narrative accompanying an illustration. So, an illustration may refer to the tables, the graphs showing your data. Alright? So, meaning the data commentary is a narrative discussion of what is written or what is illustrated on your tables and graphs. And these are the data of your research. Okay, let's move. Okay, this is an example of the data commentary on the profile of the respondents. And mind you, the profile of the respondents is put under the respondents section of the research methodology. We do not discuss it again on the results and discussion. Instead, we include it under the respondents section of the research methodology. So this is an example number 1 on how to write the data commentary. Okay. So our data, first things first, the first tip that I'd like to give to you is number 1, state where your data is located. For example, table 1 presents, take note. So what does table 1 present? The distribution of the respondents when grouped according to sex and strand and as a whole. Meaning, there is a table later below representing or illustrating the distribution of respondents according to sex and strand and as a whole. So take note that the researcher here is now starting to write the data commentary. As indicated in the sample size, represented by small letter n, there were a total of 64 male students and 171 female students. So, take a look at this. Number 1, the researcher highlighted the sample size for males and females. Next, on the other hand, on the second paragraph, the respondent explained, the researcher explained when the respondents are grouped according to strand, how many are the Humes, how many are the ABM students, how many are the home economic students. So, it's a discussion. It's a discussion of what is written or what is illustrated in the table below. So that is one example of the data commentary. So you are to, first things first, draw a 3-line table. By the way, class, this is the 3-line table. It will come out of your examinations. You are to illustrate your data using a 3-line table. First things first, you are to solve for the means and follow the verbal interpretations. And next is to write the data commentary. So this is table 1, distribution of the respondents when they are grouped according to sex and strand and as a whole. So it is explained in the data commentary above. So this is the data commentary and this is the table for the first data commentary. Alright, so it's divided into categories. When we say categories, we have sex, strand, and as a whole. Wherein our total population is 155 for male. We only got 64 as our respondents, which is 27.19% of the total 100%. Alright, so this is how we illustrate our data in a 3-line table. When we say 3-line table, we only have the atop, kisame, and salog. We do not have the halige or the partition on our tables. So this is in line with the international standards in APA 7th edition. We are to write a 3-line table following this one, like this one, in illustrating, interpreting, and presenting our data. Alright, so this is the explanation above, and this is already the data commentary of table number 1. Clear? Alright, so at this point, we are to proceed with the results and discussion. Again, our objectives this afternoon is number 1, to illustrate our data using 3-line table. Number 2, write the data commentary properly. And number 3, apply the steps on how to write the results and discussion. Okay? It is the coverage of your examination and also the steps on how to start writing your results and discussion once you have the responses coming from your survey questionnaire. All right. So first things first, I will present to you the scale of interpretation for language learning strategies used. So you will do the same class in your research. You are to provide scale of interpretation. Okay, scale of interpretation on the means of the responses or the average responses of your respondents. For example, you have Likert scale of 5 down to 1. Okay? And you are to get the average of responses per male, per female, per strand like UMS, ABM, and STEM. And the mean scores would be like 3.51 to 5 2.51 to 3.50, 1 to 2.5. And there should be a verbal interpretation class for each of the mean scores. Okay, for this range of means or average of responses, there is a corresponding verbal interpretation and descriptors. So you are to provide the same thing on your research manuscript. So how do we interpret the means of responses? Through a scale of interpretation aligned with your statement of the problem, research questions, survey questions, and the entire research instrument. Okay? So next, we have, for example, the mean score of responses is at 3.51 to 5.0. So this is interpreted as high, meaning the students exhibits high usage of language learning strategies. So 2.51 to 3.50, moderate. All right? So follow because this will be our guide later on as we discuss the results and discussion portion. Okay. So, how do you start your results and discussion? How do you begin your results and discussion class? So, take note that we begin our results and discussion with a preamble. Alright? And the preamble consists of the summary of what we did to interpret and present our data, the summary of the contents of the results and discussion, and as we transition with the research question number 1. So this is a sort of a preamble class. All of these sentences on the preliminary part of the results and discussion is called the preamble. So you are to mention what did you use to describe, present, and illustrate data. What's your main purpose in writing the results and discussion. Alright? And class, we follow on how we write the results and discussion. We follow per research questions. For example, research question number 1 is all about language learning strategies. So you are to write a subheading on language learning strategies. Okay, this is language learning strategies. Your first research question number 1 as a subheading. And class, the tip that I'd like to give to you as your teacher in inquiries and investigation and as your research teacher, as well as a researcher and a writer, begin with citing or begin with describing or defining the terms, the variables that you use per research questions. Like this example. I have cited O'Malley, Oxford, Rigney, and Griffiths in defining what is language learning strategies on my first paragraph. By the way, class, we are starting how to write the data commentary per research questions. And this is what will come out of your examinations. Okay? And this is how you also write your own results and discussion. So, first things first, you look for literature supporting your variables or your study. Next, okay, describe further what is language learning strategies used or what is your variable in the succeeding paragraphs. Now, okay, so as you transition with answering research question number 1, so you mentioned like this. Research question number 1 sought to answer or to assess the language learning strategies used when the senior high school students are grouped according to sex and strand and when taken as a whole. So begin your data commentary with number 1, a short summary or overview of your of what is being talked about. What's the topic? What's the variable? Okay? Or the key points. So this time the key points is language learning strategies. And the researcher successfully write an introduction about it. Next, on your data commentary is you mention, of course, the research question that you are trying to discuss or answer. For example, research question number 1. And then locate. Okay, location, table number 4, shows language learning strategies used by the respondents when they are grouped according to sex. This time, the researcher created a separate table for sex and as well as strand. Alright, so the technique here, class, is you are to uh, provide the highest means compared to the lowest means of your data or important data only. For example, male students got a mean of 3.17 while compare and contrast. This time we are using compare and contrast of data in writing, okay? While the female students were at 3.44. So this is how we write our data commentary. Despite this, take note that as the writer or as the researcher, you are to put implications of about your data. So despite this, both means were interpreted as high, suggesting that both sexes were high users of cognitive strategies. Wow. So amazing discussions here. I hope that you will follow this in writing your results and discussion and as well as in writing your data commentary during the examinations. Okay? So, let's proceed with the table. Okay. Take note that citing important literature or citing results of other studies like this one, okay, I've cited TAM, is a plus in writing your results and discussion. Aside from the implications, okay, for example, as noted by the results, male students moderately use social strategies while female students exhibit high usage of these strategies in English language learning. This is already class implications. When we say implications, what can you imply? What can you say about the data presented? So this is on your own na. And support your own opinions, of course, with facts coming from important literature, findings, salient findings of other studies. So this is, for example, this statement. Next, you are to conclude. If the students are using language learning strategies highly, what does it mean? Okay, this is further an implications. So you may state the overall result implies that both sexes are high users of cognitive and metacognitive strategies. Wow. So this is an example already of an implication part. First things first, let's go back. You discuss the results of your study. Discuss the means of responses coming from the female students and the male students. Proceed with writing the citing sources or citing relevant literature according to your study and implying on the results. There must be an implications of the results. Okay? So what does it mean when the students are high users of these strategies? Meaning they tend to manage their learning progress through identifying learning styles and needs. Like that. So this serves as an example class on what will come out of your examination and what will you do in writing the results and discussion. I know that this is a bit difficult right now, but trust the process. Okay, do this in the process of learning things here in our class, and I know how to appreciate really your efforts push in this subject, and it is seen on your works. Okay, and the products of this is a success, meaning your grades are getting higher as well. All right. So let's proceed with another example of writing the results and discussion. Okay. This time, this time the English level of English proficiency. So take note that uh, previously I presented with you the statement of the problem and the research questions. We have language learning strategies used and level of English proficiency as variables of this study. So also, you are to provide scale of interpretation for the level of English proficiency. And this one class is adapted from a source. So if it is adapted from a source, you are to write it down on your table that it is adapted from a source. So take note again, I'd like to highlight again that it is important for us to have scale of interpretation of our data. Meaning, when we garnered some results, when we compute for the means of our data already, how can we interpret it? Through a scale of interpretation, which you are to provide in your paper. Okay? So let's proceed. Next is the level of English proficiency. So this time class, the researcher started with a statement naman about language proficiency, citing Canale. Okay, so language proficiency. Because he is trying here to discuss the level of English proficiency of senior high school students answering the research question number 2. Okay? Follow. This is already literature. Okay? So this is already writing, how to write your results and discussion, and how to write data commentary. Next. Okay. Follow. Table 7 presents the level of English proficiency according to sex. Okay. This time, the researcher compare and contrast the results of female students from the male students, wherein female students garnered a higher mean of 32.61 compared to male students who got 32.24. So there is compare and contrast already. And take note of this. The researcher again cited literature. Okay, results affirm. Does it disagree or agree with the results of other study? Ang inyong results. So you are to write it down as well after you discuss the results. So this is already discussion part. Okay? In the like manner, female students achieve better results when compared to male students in terms of proficiency in the English language. Wow, very good. Because, you know what, class? This literature, these results of previous studies will support your own results. And this is important in writing the results and discussion. Wherein, in the results and discussion, we have to provide findings, okay, important findings of related studies, just like what the researcher did. Okay. Moreover, you are to imply. This is the implication part of the researcher's results and discussion. If the students got higher means of 32.61, what does it state? So meaning both of the sexes are under vantage level or B2 level. Refer to your interpretation, scale of interpretation, wherein the researcher implies. This time, look at this one. This is already implication part here. Okay? So, to summarize, we have three steps on how to write our data commentary under the results and discussion section. Number one, explain or narrate the results found in your table. Number two, provide implications about the results. And finally, you are to write or you are to cite previous findings of related studies supporting your research results. Okay, that's three steps on how to write correctly the results and discussion or the data commentary of your results and discussion. All right. So meaning here is the table. So this is how again we illustrate correctly our tables. So follow this one. Bold table 7. Italicized level of English proficiency of senior high school students when grouped according to sex. Very complete, right? So for example, categories: sex, male, female. So an X here represents the mean. That's the symbol for the mean. So 32.24, 32.61. And then class, the same what you will do during the examination, you are to provide categories, the mean, and the verbal interpretation. For example, the verbal interpretation is vantage. Vantage. So SD here represents the standard deviation. It's a plus if you can provide or if you can compute the standard deviation during the examination. But I will only check for the means of uh, if you have computed the means and then the verbal interpretation. So it's a plus if you can provide the standard deviation of your data. Okay? So follow this table class during the examination as well as during the writing of your results and discussions. All right? So finally, of course, this is according to sex. There is also a data about level of English proficiency when the senior high school students are grouped according to strand. So I will provide you this manuscript as your main source or main reference on how to write your data commentary during the examination, as well as on how to write later on your results and discussion. Does that sound good to you? Okay? So let us proceed. So again, this is for the strands. When the respondents are grouped according to strand. There. So table 8 shows our data about the level of English proficiency of senior high school students when grouped according to strand and when taken as a whole. So during the examination, you are to compute for the means, okay, and the verbal interpretation. Okay? So the verbal interpretation will be provided on the scale of interpretation sang inyong nga data. Meaning, you are to interpret na lang gid based on the scale of interpretation. So, you are to provide in your tables the categories, the means, and the verbal interpretation. It's a plus if you can provide the standard deviation as well. Alright? So, if you have any questions, you may send a message on our inquiries group chat in Microsoft Teams, as well as you can send a message personally in my account in Microsoft Teams class. Okay? Thank you so much for listening. I tell you, when you listen to this lecture series, you are able to learn on what to do, not just during the examinations, but as well as on how to write your sections of the research paper. So this has been Sir Robert. Have a great day ahead. Thank you so much, and God bless everyone on your journey through life. May you succeed in your endeavors, and may you graduate on time in the senior high school. Thank you, and have a great day ahead.